Right, everybody, can we start the meeting, please? That'd be really good. You should have your papers in front of you. We've got a large number of people here, which is always nice to see. My name is Susan Hinchcliffe. I'm leader of Bradford and chair of West Yorkshire Transport Committee. I'm only here for the first half hour of the meeting, unfortunately, because I've got other meetings to go to. It's a bit of a packed afternoon. But Councillor Peter Carlow, who's a deputy chair on transport, alongside Councillor Eric Firth, will be leading the meeting after I have to leave at past, or a little bit before past if possible. So, just do who we are around the table, so everybody knows who we are. I've given my name. What's your name?
Adam Hunt, Committee Support.
Councillor Peter Carlill, Deputy Chair of the Transport Committee.
And Councillor Eric Firth, also Deputy Chair of the Transport Committee.
Councillor Matthew McLaughlin, Transport Engagement Lead for Kirklees Council.
Councillor Kate Revilius, Exec Member for Transport, City of York Council.
Councillor Alex Ross Shaw, Portfolio Holder for Regeneration Planning and Transport on Bradford Council.
Sarah Courtney, Cabinet Member for Regeneration and Transport, Colverdale Council.
Councillor Chris Still from Bradford Council.
Councillor Adele Ray from Leeds Council.
Councillor Andrew Pinnock, Kirklees.
Councillor Tony Wallace, Wakefield.
Councillor Tony McGrath, Kirklees.
Councillor Joe Atkinson, Calderdale.
Councillor Neil Buckley, Leeds. Councillor Raymond Jones, Leeds.
Councillor Joe Wheatley, Bradford.
Councillor Matthew Morley, Cabinet Member, Planning, Transportation, Highways, Wakefield Council.
Councillor Pryor from Leeds.
Councillor Jacob Williamson from Wakefield.
Councillor Katie Kimber from Calderdale.
Councillor Caroline Firth, Bradford.
Hello, Helen Allerton, Head of Transport Policy at Combined Authority.
Melissa Liebird, Interim Head of Passenger Experience here at the Combined Authority.
Mick Bunting, Interim Director of Transport Operations, Combined Authority. Good afternoon.
And I'm Simon Warburton, Executive Director for Transport.
Lovely, thank you very much, everybody, for that. So, any apologies for absence? There's a lot of people here, which is always good to see.
Apologies have been received from Councillor Moses Cook, Councillor Andrew Boyd, Councillor Annie Maloney and Natalie Sykes.
Thank you very much. Any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests? None received. Thank you very much. Exempt information. Now there is some exempt information in here under Appendix 2 under 19 fares, and therefore can people please be mindful, and Councillor Carlow will remind people when we get to that item that if you want to discuss anything in that appendix, then we'll have to make sure everybody leaves the room who's not meant to be in that. If you can discuss it in public, then that would be great, and we can stay in this room and with people present. So that's what that's for. And then minutes of the meeting of the Transport Committee held on 28th of August. Any comments, questions? Councillor Jones.
I did raise the issue of we're not going to contact anybody after 8 o'clock at night, and my concern was for elderly and disabled and women being left in vulnerable positions. It's got down as resolved, but unfortunately I don't think that's been resolved. And it's not resolved at all, and I will continue to fetch that here because I'm genuinely concerned that people are being left in vulnerable positions and it's not acceptable.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Simon, do you want to take that away?
Yeah, we will do. I do apologise to Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones, for raising that. Any other comments, questions on the minutes of the meeting? No? Councillor Jacob Williamson.
Sorry, I wasn't here at the last meeting, but I understand you had the rail operators here. Because I raised, I think not last meeting before, about the passenger data from the rail operators. I wonder if we would had any information come back on that.
And what was the specific question, sorry, Councillor Williamson?
It was to do with like service reductions and carriage reductions and stuff. I was just wondering if any passenger data had come back at all, because we were going to ask for it.
We had Northern and we had TPE.
We did.
I'm not sure what, I can't quite recall if there's any further data than the bit that, there was quite a comprehensive report that came. And perhaps we could just talk outside the meeting, just see what it was specifically that they should have provided, which wasn't provided in that report. If we can take that, Helen, would you mind having a conversation with Councillor Williamson afterwards? Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions? Apart from those two elements, are we happy to pass those correct record? All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That is carried. So we're going to bring forward a Bradford interchange next steps. Sorry, as chair of the committee, it's my prerogative to do that before I leave the room. It obviously has been a major issue for Bradford for some time now. We're very encouraged to see that the combined authority is now mobilising to reopen the interchange, which residents who've been very patient will be really relieved to hear. Obviously, there's a report in here about the survey results, and the summary I thought was quite helpful in here. But Simon, would you like to do some opening remarks on this before I ask questions?
Thank you, Chair. So this report builds on the report that we took to the June meeting of the combined authority, with a focus on three parallel work streams that are underway. Firstly, establishing through the survey programme how we can go about safely reopening Bradford Interchange. We have also started further work on the back of the recent mass transit consultation to begin to look at the longer term bus station location within Bradford city centre, and also continuing work under mixed guidance in terms of on-street provision for bus users through the immediate period. As we set out in the report, we have now had all of the advice from Jacobs, and we have subsequently, and I do apologise to members that it wasn't available in time for the publication of the original agenda pack. We've now made available on the Transport Committee site a full copy of the Jacobs report, and what that report looked into in particular was the load-bearing capacity of the structure, a structural assessment of the health and safety risks of occupying the bus station with passengers and vehicles, and a structural assessment to determine the operational life expectancy and ongoing cost. What the attached report confirms is that the structure is comparable with its age, but that the findings of the investigation indicate that the risk associated with the operation of the interchange and subsequent reinstatement of both pedestrian and vehicular traffic loading is low, provided that appropriate control measures are implemented. And then Jacobs go on to append a safety risk assessment that delineates that further. Building on that and taking the advice of the Combined Authorities legal team, we have then appointed external health and safety lawyers who in turn advised us on bringing in an independent forensic structural engineer so that they could further inform a decision-making regime to ensure that the Combined Authority, in moving to reopen the facility, meet our duties under sections 2 and 3 of the Health and Safety at Work Act. They relate to both ensuring the health and safety of our employees and also ensuring the safety of all other users of the facility. What the forensic structural engineer has concluded is set out in full at paragraph 3.19, and he finds that the condition of the interchange is comparable with its 50-year life, and that given the nature of the incident in January 2024, that we as a body have taken the reasonably practical steps to be expected of a competent authority, that we've identified and proposed reasonably practical steps for inspection, testing and assessment so that we can undertake the right action planning, and of course that we should note that our duty is ongoing, and therefore we need to maintain a monitoring regime around the facility. But that said, it is his view that the conclusions that Jacobs have reached are appropriate conclusions. In doing so, he's highlighted in particular two elements, one relating to the staircases leading from the lower concourse to the bus station, which can only be reopened once the tiles have been removed from staircase walls. There is a programme of work now that's already underway to do that. But he's also highlighted that those retail units that are beneath the bus station slab and affected by water ingress should not be reopened until remedial actions identified by the Drainage Management Survey have been undertaken, as there remains a risk of water coming into contact with electricity in that location, and that is something that we continue to work through. So, on the basis of the Jacobs advice and the further assurance, we're clear now with our legal advisors that we have a plan in place that can take us towards reopening. There are a series of mobilisation activities underway against that plan, and it's our intention that by the end of the month, in time for the meeting of the Combined Authority on the 31st of October, we'll be ready to advise members on an appropriate date to reopen.
Thank you very much, Simon. So good to see that work is underway already to reopen and getting doing those next steps. Obviously, those are outlined in this document, and there's a proper estate management plan in place going forward to make sure. It sounds like, from what I'm seeing, that all the places in the interchange, or practically all the places in the interchange that we all know as residents who use it regularly, those are going to be reopened again, and people will see those places that they've seen before. It just needs to be reopened. It just help people navigating around the district, especially with the new bus routes and bus stops. So it'd be great to see that. And also in here, of course, we have an indication about in the future, with a mid to long term, for example, when we talk about trams, there will be an interchange with the tram system as well. So we're looking ahead and making sure that we've got an interchange which is fit for the future, notwithstanding that this one is going to be open in the short to medium term. So any questions, comments on this? Councillor Ross-Shaw, Councillor Wheatley.
Thank you, and thanks to officers for the report. And obviously, it's taken some time to get here, but we know how important it was to make sure that work and investigation was robust. But obviously, for Bradford, it's as good news as the reopening of a bus station, but obviously we would never want it to see or anticipate closing can be. and we've seen the kind of disruption it's caused, and I know our team's worked very closely with the Combined Authority on trying to mitigate that disruption as we've undergone those Transforming Cities works, which we're now really starting to see the benefits from. If you come to Bradford and you see Market Street opening up and think that used to be, you know, full of buses, and now the kind of people have reclaimed that, and walking down the middle of it looks fantastic. So you can really see the vision coming together. So really pleasing to know that the station's now going to reopen as part of that. And I know we're looking at the sort of what we were calling the interim works, but are now just the sort of beneficial works to improve that look and feel of the station, so it's a suitable gateway for our year as UK City of Culture as well. So pleased that it's kind of coming together. It's obviously been a tough year for the buses, and as you said, Chair, there's a lot of work to do to kind of promote that and get people back in and working with people so they can get used to the new layouts as well. So looking forward to doing that and kind of powering into 2025 with a bit of momentum behind them as well.
Thank you, Councillor Rushall. Councillor Weed.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. Under the summary, bullet point 1, it says reopening the lower concourses, initial step to be completed as soon as possible. Do we have any rough timescales for that, rather than to be completed as soon as possible?
Yes, I'm hopeful that that work should be completed and we should have that open by the early part of November.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments on this, or are we happy to endorse the next steps? So if we're happy with recommendations, can I support those and see all those in favour please show? Thank you very much. Just want everyone to get on with it, Simon, I think is the clear indication from this meeting. Lovely. Well, I will cede the chair now to Councillor Carlow, as I now have to leave to another meeting. Thank you, Councillor Carlow. Thank you very much. And apologies everybody that I have to leave early today.
Okay, thank you. So we obviously adjusted the order of the agenda there, but we'll go back then to the standard orders to take that. So item 5 is the transport policy update. Helen, do you want to introduce that?
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Okay, so this is the report that we bring, well, every time to the meetings now, but it's kind of the collection of areas to just kind of bring up to date on a number of things that don't get caught elsewhere. So I think just to start with in here, we've just kind of given a bit of a summary of where the Department for Transport seems to be going around, kind of just the broader areas that they're focusing on, and really reminding on the local growth plan and the work we're doing around the local transport plan to link into that. The second area in here was around active travel. This was just to bring to Transport Committee the capability ratings that were published by Active Travel England in September. Combined Authority has been rated as a 3 again, which is good news because that keeps our rating the same as last time. And it means that we can still access the same kind of thresholds, if you like, of funding when we come round to another funding allocation. Also, just to note under there, we are continuing to build our active travel strategy and hoping to, before the end of this year, have a draft of that we can incorporate into our local transport plan. So that's all kind of coming together through that process. Thirdly, in the update, just wanted to bring a point around the Levelling Up Fund. So obviously Levelling Up Fund was a previous government funding pot, if you like, for which the Combined Authority was successful in bringing in Levelling Up Fund for round 1 and round 2, but this is particularly around round 2, which was including £41.25 million across a number of schemes. So the A629 North Halifax, the A639 Park Road in Pontefract, and a package, if you like, of bus station stops and highway improvements across the network. The process to access the Levelling Up Fund that government made available, we've been working through. That means that we submitted on Friday our programme business case to DFT for their formal assessment. Obviously, since we've submitted it, we've had a change of government and a change of kind of focus and potential structure around some of this funding. We don't know quite where this will come out after the budget, etc., etc. But we have completed our part of the bargain, if you like, to get to this point now. So we just wanted to bring it back through Transport Committee because it's been a while since it's been here, to just let you know that that business case has gone in now. So we enter the next stage of the conversation. Next in the update is around the EV strategy. So if you recall, we consulted on our electric vehicle strategy and our local electric vehicle infrastructure programme over the summer alongside our LTP engagement. The electric vehicle strategy consultation ended on the 12th of September, and we had a really good response to that consultation. A report on kind of that consultation along with the LTP engagement will come back in January to committee, but that was a good discussion around that. And then just lastly, in this paper, just the update from Rail North through this, which is just essentially reminding Transport Committee that the Accessibility Task and Finish Group are continuing to kind of develop their plan for achieving kind of step-free access across stations across the north. And TfN have developed a kind of a state of play review, if you like, on the rail network, where projects are kind of highlighted, they've done a programme to look at where there are gaps in the rail network and where therefore they could focus on some of their kind of requirements going down the line. So it's really to just remind Transport Committee across that. TfN are also looking to establish a Leeds area task force as well, to which we will update Transport Committee as and when that that emerges and how we involve and work with that. Okay.
Thank you, Helen. Yeah, a lot of issues detailed in that report, some of which we talked of previously, like the accessibility at stations and the EV charging. Just quick add before I go, it's really good to see obviously that we've retained that level 3 rating, the highest rating any authority has got for active travel, and that does include notes on the capability of the combined authority and district to deliver schemes, as well as obviously the political ambitions of those in this room and district politicians as well. So I think thanks to all of the officers that have delivered that, but also all of ourselves as well for seeking to be at that level. Obviously the next level up is level 4, which no authority has got, which it does report that we'd love to work towards at the time. But any questions then on the details of that report? Yeah, Councillor Morley.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chair. It goes back to the Access for All funding. This first started coming about and certainly come on my desk in 2019. We bidded for the Pontefract Monkhill station. To date, no work has still happened on that station. I think they're threatening to put some audience up, but this is a tremendously long time now. I did raise it at the last Transport Committee. I don't recall that I didn't receive an update on that. Can we get an update as where we are with that programme? Because this was campaigned quite a long time ago by many local members and community groups in the Pontefract area. So it's something that has been talked about. The money's there. What are the hold-ups? And similarly, one that's not on the agenda, but one we really like to see moving forward is Knockley Station on the very edge of the Wakefield district. That has a massive issue with accessibility as well as I know other areas are. But it's just to start putting that on the radar. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. So we asked the questions about Pontefract Monkhill after the last Transport Committee meeting, and yeah, thank you for the reminder because I don't think we had a response, so we'll follow up again on that. And on Knottingley Station, as you know, obviously we're working on our new local transport plan, and behind that we are also working on our pipeline for our implementation plan. So thank you for flagging Knottingley because we'll make sure that it is captured in that process.
Thank you, Councillor Courtney.
Yeah, thank you. It is great that the combined authority has kept the level 3 status. That's brilliant. I've got a couple of comments. The first one really is about, it's great to hear that the combined authority is looking at developing an active travel strategy, and that's fantastic. But what I'd like to say is, can we make sure that the strategies, and this isn't just a Wicker issue, it happens everywhere, but the different strategies are all making sure that they align with each other. So, for example, there's the this active travel strategy. There's the transport plan, and then also the economic strategy, and all of these things are really intertwined. And I just think it's really helpful to make sure that the strategies are aligned with each other and working to support each other and not in competition with each other, which I know that you know, but I just wanted to sort of be really explicit about that because they really feed into each other. The transport plan can really feed into helping reduce inequalities, getting people back into work, and all of those sorts of things. So it is really important. That's my first question. Did you? It's up to you. Don't mind how you do it.
Yeah, take the answer for that.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So the active travel strategy is a daughter document of the local transport plan. So, and it's not sitting on its own in a modal silo either. It is integrated in our street space work within that. And in turn, the local transport plan is feeding into and in reverse the local growth plan. So the look and feel across those documents should hopefully all come out in the same direction. So.
Brilliant, thank you. And I suppose just sort of a thing around around sort of buses and franchising. So obviously Calderdale, we're in the later stages of the franchising, and we're just, what is making sure that we keep our bus services working in the sort of medium term while we're waiting for franchising. I think it's not just a Calderdale issue. I think it's all of, especially those of us that are on the edges of that border onto other transport authorities, and just making sure that our bus services remain. I know that we don't have control over it, but just doing everything we possibly can in order to sort of keep them going, because obviously we have our own inclusive economy strategy, and it's really important for us that our buses are working, especially for the people that are poorer in our borough and have got the greatest levels of deprivation. Those bus services are often a lifeline to work and college, and helping people get out of economic inactivity. I have got one more question, so shall I just do that now? And that's just around the accessibility and the access for all programs. It's great, but it's not 10 million, and we've got 70% of stations are inaccessible. So can we just make sure that next time we're putting in bids for, is it the CRSTS fund, that we just really try and boost that as much as we can?
So, incredibly important point that's raised with regard to transition through to bus franchising. We're already engaging with operators to make sure that we can identify any issues that present themselves well upstream. And there is a certain amount of resource within the transition budget that the authority sets aside to help in that regard. But yeah, I can assure members that it is an aspect of transition that we'll continue to monitor very closely, and we do recognise it as a risk.
Sorry, on that last question, just
so it's just around in terms of the sort of accessibility, the station's accessibility, just about the fact that there isn't really enough money to do everything that we need to do, is there?
Thank you. I had a complete mind blank after so access, because as we're flagging rightly there in our LTP, but also in there, the 70% of our stations are not fully compliant. That programme will feature in our CRSTS, as it did in the last round. There have been a number of stations that have been included in there as part of that funding programme outside of Access for All, so it is broader than that we do try. We have a number of stations being included in the Transpennine route upgrade at the moment, so that's helpful again, but obviously it's only a tiny bit of the network. So.
Thank you. Yeah. No, really important point really on buses, Sarah, because the reason the Mayor made the decision she did really was that decline of bus services that has been ongoing for decades, really. And how do we try and insist that decline is at least halted until we get to under public control? That's a real struggle that we've got at the moment. There's some in the passenger experience report that we come on to that shows just where services are. I've got Councillor Pinnock next, and unless I see any more indications, that'll be all right. Yeah. So Councillor Pinnock, then Councillor McGrath, and that'll be the end.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of miscellaneous points. I'd like to know, you were talking about franchising just now, and the subject of Wakefield bus station came into my mind, which, as far as I know, is either in the process of being transferred from Arriva to the authority or will be. But what are the implications there for the costs of anything to do with having to remodel it or repairs? And then just an odd inquiry about Batley Station. Half of Batley Station is inaccessible from a accessibility point of view. The bit where you draw up to the station is all right, but the other side is really very difficult. Now that might come under the Transpennine upgrade, of course. But my main question was going to be about electric vehicle charging. And it's not some of the obvious things that are down here, but what work has been done or needs to be done to ascertain whether the electrical supply network is robust enough to deal with a vast increase, or at least a large increase, in the number of people using and recharging electric vehicles.
Thank you. I don't know, Simon, is there anything you want to briefly touch on the Wakefield bus station issue, and then Helen, I guess.
Yeah, certainly, and perhaps if I pick up Batley Station, and then I'll leave Helen to solve the problems of the national grid. With regard to Wakefield, yes, our intention at present is, in preparation for franchising, to move to acquisition of both the depot and the bus station. I was going to pick up issues associated with Wakefield Depot at present under the general update on bus network. So if we pause on that, but with regard to the bus station, as part of work that we're undertaking at the moment to assess all of the assets that we would acquire, there's survey work that's underway, so that we're very clear in terms of the state of any asset that we're looking to acquire. Certainly, we know that there are long-standing issues with rain and the roof at Wakefield bus station, which need resolving. With regard to Batley Station, my understanding is that there are improvements through Transpennine at Batley Station. It's not an easy station to resolve from an access perspective, given the topography around the station. But I think more widely, the whole issue of access for all actually plays into what we can hopefully address through the government's intention to move to Great British Railways, which is that, as members are aware, we have been frustrated as an organisation by the pace, or at times lack of it, that we've seen within the rail industry in actually taking the funds that you have secured and set aside for it and delivering them in the ground. And that's going to be critical if we're going to step forward with access measures at a better pace than we've seen from the rail industry in recent years.
Thank you. Just in terms of electric you recognise and you identify a real challenge that there is through the climate and environment plan work. We've been looking at network capacity, because this affects obviously not car charging but our ability to bring in more electric buses, etc., etc. And done a number of studies around the capacity across the network and how we can bring more in. And currently, there is a reasonable capacity across West Yorkshire, but obviously as time goes on, things change and things get added to that network. So it's something that we are constantly monitoring. And obviously, there are other technologies beside electric vehicles as well. So.
Thank you. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Chair. Going into the 71% of stations not hitting the accessibility levels that we want to provide in West Yorkshire, and following on from both Councillor Courtney and Councillor Morley, I think it is, mentioning specific train stations that need the upgrades, for accessibility. Is there a target list that you have, or is it based solely on where funds are coming in? So somebody mentioned the TransPennine funds being used on specific stations, so they just got lucky because they're part of the wider strategic plan to upgrade that area. Then there's also the Penistone line that I think's got £96 million of the funding. So those stations, even though maybe less used, are they more likely to get done quicker because they've got funding on that line? And because people are mentioning specific stations, probably within the wards they represent, I'm going to do the same. Is there an update on the upgrade from stairs to potentially a lift or some other solution at Honley train station? Thank you.
Thank you. Luckily, I've got New Pudsey train station in my ward, which is reasonably well served. But we'll go through. Helen, I guess the wider question is around just where that funding that we've set aside from the CRSTS is identified to go, as well as then those specific projects.
So in terms of kind of wider, if you know what I mean, quite a few years ago now, we did a study on accessibility across all stations across West Yorkshire, and it's through that list, if you like, that when funding comes, we can work and understand where things go, and that's then based upon kind of patronage use, but also kind of level of access. So there comes a number of criteria, and it obviously comes around to kind of what the objectives of the fund are as well to meet some of that. And Access for All specifically is done through Northern, so that is therefore them kind of working out how best which stations to put forward. In terms of Honley, I would have to check. I can't remember off the top of my head where that one sits. So, but in terms of its kind of level of funding and delivery, might be able to say.
Councillor Firth, did you want to come in on that?
Yes, I'd just like to correct Councillor about the luff bid for the Penistone line. You think we've got, Tony, 96 million. It's been to governments, and they've announced it several times. I think it's 48 million or something like that. We wanted 120 odd million. We've got 40. We haven't got 48 million pounds. They've announced it 4 times, I think. They still haven't released it.
Yeah,
and
sorry, I was making a point about a larger. So if there's a large strategic amount.
Use your microphone, Tony.
And can I just mention the access problem with railway stations, not just in West Yorkshire. It's throughout the north in particular. The northwest, West Yorkshire, and the northeast are all being discussed on this working party that I attend, and the amount of money to make them right, for want of a better expression, is vast, and so we'll be working through that. But some are far worse in certain parts of the country, as I mentioned, than the problems we face in West Yorkshire.
Thank you. Yeah, I think obviously Councillor Steele mentioned the point at the last meeting as well that even those stations that are fully accessible onto the platform, you then do have a struggle sometimes trying to get onto the train, which can be at some height difference from the platform, which is a significant issue around as well. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on. Obviously, the only action there is to note the contents of the report, which I'm sure we all have. So we'll move on to the next one, which is the update on the Mayor's West Yorkshire Local Transport Plan, which is back to you, please, Helen, to introduce.
Thank you, Councillor Kyle. Okay, so again, this is just really an update on where we are on the local transport plan, and for members to just note that update. What we're setting out here is really that we are developing our local transport plan in line with the local growth plan, as we were just mentioning earlier, and the climate and environment plan, to make sure there is a tie-in across the piece, as you would expect. This paper then kind of goes on to really talk about kind of one of the areas of the local transport plan which is kind of featuring across all of that piece, which is really around the customer and that door-to-door journey, and to understand kind of how we make sure we embed that person perspective into our plan development and use that from all the bases, including kind of making sure we have a high quality and attractive offer, if you like, across our transport network, and all the way through to that door-to-door journey. So it's really starting to kind of embed some of that thinking in our policy approach. This will then help us shape essentially our policy framework that we're hoping to discuss with yourselves in a workshop, hopefully before Christmas, but we'll come on to that in time. The paper then also just goes on to just kind of bring back and summarise from the engagement that was held over the summer. So our engagement and our vision and objectives closed on the 30th of September. This was a really good opportunity to have a conversation about transport across kind of the whole region, and to through stakeholder groups but the public as well. So, and we do want to reiterate your thanks in helping us to kind of facilitate some of those sessions. Your attendance there was really welcome. And the outcomes of those sessions and that whole engagement will come back to Transport Committee in January, as I've said. Early indications have shown, and we had almost 600 responses to the survey, and some really good panel discussions and webinars and focus groups. So we had quite a good mix. But across all of the early indications are showing there's good support for our vision and objectives across the piece. There was particular kind of conversations again around bus, as you'd expect, as kind of a key topic of challenge and conversation across West Yorkshire, and specific kind of local issues. But it was a really good discussion and approach towards our vision and objectives. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll open up for questions and comments on this report. Just to note that obviously there is the list of principles that are in development on that report to come in as well. I've got Councillor Buckley first.
Thank you, Chair. On page 16, 3.8, research is underway to understand the key challenges facing transport users. And then underneath that, and on page 17, is a list of possible things like making transport attractive and user-friendly, affordable and good value, safe and accessible, fast, timely and reliable. Well, if those are all obvious prerequisites to a successful transport system, so what research can possibly be underway if we already know the answers? And secondly, and it may be the moment to bring this up, a clipping from a paper here. Reeves targets £2 fare cap. I just wondered if anybody had any pre-budget knowledge of this, or whether you can share it with us, please.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. The first, people will remember on the previous meeting as well, we discussed the surveys that had gone on around with passengers. I must note, probably if we weren't doing work to do the research, you'd be asking us why we weren't doing the research, probably Neil. So it's interesting that you're asking us why we're doing the work there, but we can go in more depth about that. I don't know whether any of us in the room have necessarily any inkling of what's going in the budget, so we'll wait for that. We've got discussions later on the next report around how we have to prepare for what might be in that budget, and what has been, unfortunately, a period of time where no decision has been taken on the national fares because of the election and where we got to it, and that's really a struggle. We ourselves are outside that national fare, but that doesn't mean that we're not waiting for a decision therefore on that, as we detailed in the last meeting, about how much funding we may have to continue the work we've done at the minute. So that's a real struggle. But Helen, did you want to come back on the...
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. I think what we're saying here is, for example, as we've noted there, the annual public perceptions of transport survey, for example, it's just making sure that when we do our policy making, we are understanding exactly what the challenges people have currently and what the opportunities are therefore. So making sure we have regular contact with the public and stakeholders is really important to kind of make sure we are setting our policy direction in the right direction.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just on the customer principles set out in the report, safe and accessible. I just note that that's one sentence compared to quite a larger amount of detail in all of the other principles. Can I just say that does look a bit thin, and in the light of the statistics and the conversation we had at the last Transport Committee meeting, which were very we're actually very shocking about perceptions of safety and realities of safety on our transport network. So I could just advise that that could do with a bit more fleshing out and a few more aims and objectives put into it like the others, so that it looks like we are in fact prioritising it, because we are.
Yeah, thank you, and noted. And it's unfortunately one sentence that captures a whole world of things that are going on behind it. At the moment, we've got a whole piece of work that will fit into the local transport plan around EDI, but safety, accessibility under that, and a whole strategy that we're currently in process of developing.
Thank you. I can't see any others on. Do you want to come back?
I'll have a second bite if nobody's going to jump ahead of me. Just on the partnership working with the districts on the policy development, I'm just wondering if you'd be able to tell us when our district officer teams and technical teams will be able to have sight of some of the detail that you're looking to co-develop with them. They've asked me to ask you, so I am.
That's an interesting question because they work with us every week as a team. That the officers do. We see chief highway officers every month, and they see content through that. And we have co-development workshops with other officers in their team every month as well. There is one on Friday, so they are part of that process.
There's some work, obviously, because we've got the report to write up of the consultation for the vision before we then go really deeply into the specific policies on a public level. So that'll be the next step. I can't see any more indications of that. So obviously the recommendations on there are that we note the report, but also note the work that's underway to develop the customer principles. We're obviously not agreeing to any of them, it's just noting that work. So there'll be a further report that comes. So we move on to the next report, which is the passenger experience report. Just before we start, we do obviously have the exempt information that's linked to this in the appendix, modelling options for proposed changes to the under-19 scheme. Now, in 3.9 to 3.12 of the report, it does talk about, obviously, the wider issue. So perfectly happy to discuss that a section of it in public. But do you mind, just for the ability of choreographing the meeting, if members do want to go into the details that's in the private appendix, would they mind indicating now, and then we'll move that discussion to the end of the item so that we can decide whether we exclude the press or public. I can't see anyone noting that, so we'll take it as going forward that we're continuing in just the public session, raising the public items. If anyone does raise any questions on the appendix, we'll then move that to a suitable time and exclude people from. Apart from that, Melvin, do you want to kick us off on that?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so if we start with patronage then in terms of our broader bus network, we can see that we're at approximately 75% of where we were pre-pandemic, so March 2020. When we've looked at the year-on-year comparison across our summer months, so certainly between last year and this year, we have seen a subtle nuance linked to younger persons' travel. So we have seen a slight dip for the under-19s and the under-26, and obviously they are a really important demographic for us. But in terms of actual overall patronage, we are at around 75% of where we were pre-pandemic. In terms of the park and ride, we have seen an increase of bus journeys of about 3,500. That is across all of our 3 sites, and that again, that's comparing the period of August last year to this year. And thinking of journeys overall, it's 81% of where we were pre-pandemic at 2019. And we know that this patronage obviously continues to be linked very much with work patterns since the pandemic, where hybrid working has been adopted. Moving on to fares and inquiries. So in terms of our contact centre, pretty much consistent with the volumes of inquiries. We've looked at August. That's a really busy month for our contact centres. It's very much linked to the school year and inquiries around school travel. We have seen a slight decrease though in ticket sales and inquiries overall at our travel centres, and there is an absolute causal relationship in terms of the temporary closure of Bradford interchange, because when we've looked at the data and we've excluded Bradford, we can see that our inquiries and our number of ticket sales are pretty consistent. So there's definitely been an impact of the closure of Bradford interchange. Moving on then to network, and looking at the services. There were some price introductions, so some increases from Arriva that were introduced on the 29th of September, but a couple of their fares remain static, which is the adult and child day tickets. And then just to note, obviously, that there have been some service disruptions linked to Arriva and very much linked to the bus depot situation in Wakefield, along with the challenges around bus driver shortages, and that's had a notable impact on our services in our Wakefield, Leeds and Kirklees districts in particular. Thinking about how we continue to invest then in our future workforce and grow our talent pipeline in the transport sector, we're really proud to be working with the Ahead Partnership. They did a presentation at a previous Bus Alliance meeting. The whole idea is that we want to inspire young people to really think about career opportunities within transport, and what we're working to now is a series of interventions that officers can support. So we'll be looking at things like career panels, work experience opportunities, and it's very much a two-way process as well. So as well as wanting to see people enter the transport sector as a real career opportunity, it's also a fantastic way to engage with young people around how we shape our services and we think about how young people use our bus network. So great work that's going on there. And then equally important when we think about underrepresentation, officers attended a Women in Network event that was held in September by Gravitas Recruitment, where we brought together some really high profile females in our transport sector, just to look at some of the barriers and opportunities of how we can encourage more women into more senior roles, in particular within the transport industry. Moving on to the under-19s travel scheme. So just again, in terms of context for this, it's a scheme, it's around the fares and ticketing scheme for young people aged between 5 to 19. This particular part of the scheme applies to the single day ticket, which is owned by the combined authority. So there are a number of young people's products, but they are also owned by the West Yorkshire Ticketing Company. This particular scheme relies on the voluntary contribution of the bus operators working in collaboration with the combined authority, and one of the key elements of this is around ensuring that there is one consistent fare for young people, to simplify that and make sure that there's pricing equality across our districts. To help support young people, particularly in the cost of living crisis, those fares have remained static for 3 years. Obviously, we have seen inflationary pressures, costs, operational costs for bus operators have also increased over that period of time. There's also been challenges again with national driver shortages, and therefore the operator asked for us to start to look at the opportunity around increasing the customer-facing fare. Just to give some context, over 4.5 million young people have actually benefited from this scheme, to the tune of 1.2 million since the scheme was introduced in 2019. There is a little bit of context in terms of the sort of looking at the fares and thinking about when we would like to introduce them, and that's very much linked to the autumn statement and central government's position nationally around funding for travel schemes and transport more broadly. So in lieu of that announcement, what we have done is worked with operators to start to devise a series of proposed options for customer fares moving forwards. I'm going to hand over to Helen for the next section for rail. Thank you.
Yeah, should we take questions on that first bit of the report before we move over to the next section? And yeah, as we saw before, if we stay away from what's in the private document then, because members haven't really expressed an interest to come in. Did you want to add to that introduction first, Simon, and then I'll come in?
Thank you, Chair. So it was just to add for members' information. So obviously, since we published the agenda, there's been a degree of coverage in the press around the Arriva Wakefield depot position. To summarise for members, the maintenance shed at the Wakefield depot has effectively been condemned, and therefore they've had to cease any form of maintenance activity within that shed. They've also had to declare an exclusion zone of, I think it's 8 metres around the maintenance shed as well. So that's significantly reduced the operating space that Arriva have within the Wakefield depot. We've been supporting them to try to find temporary locations, and I know they've been getting support from council colleagues as well in that regard. But what it means is that they are introducing additional time into their general logistics operations around the fleet. In addition to that, as we've noted before at the committee, they continue with driver recruitment and retention issues. It does mean that we are seeing a reduction in the performance of the network, and they want to explore with us how they go about addressing that. There have been suggestions in the press of service withdrawals. We've not got to that point with them as yet, and were that to happen, it would only happen in a timely fashion according to the agreed dates. And so we will be continuing to help Arriva to work through the position that they're in at the moment, with a view to safeguarding the network for residents, particularly in the Wakefield area where the greatest risks lie at present.
Thank you, Simon. So we'll open up for questions on this report. I've got Councillor Morley first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Simon, for the update, though. Obviously, the depot has been in a state of disrepair for many, many, many years. Probably, funding not being put in place by bus operators to make sure that we are in the situation. It was interesting that I believe they did meet with the local MP and guaranteed or put it to him that bus routes would not be affected by this. So never really updated ourselves at the council about this, but it's concerning. It's massively concerning that they have a shortage of 76 drivers, equivalent to about 22 buses in that area that could potentially be taken out. It's so disappointing after so many months and years of cutbacks. The BSIP money that had been put in place, this could now be at risk by Arriva. It's not about funding this now, it's about their not being to comply with bus services within Wakefield, South Leeds and North Kirklees. So anything that we can do working together to plug these gaps. People need a decent bus service. We've only just got a core service back again. This is taking a massive step backwards, so very, very much dismayed by what I'm hearing about this. We need to be working together. Franchise still a long time off for West Yorkshire, so we need to do what we can about this, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. Yeah, and to follow up on that slightly, the Chair and I met with Arriva just last week with Simon to discuss this issue and to really ask what plans they had for returning what service there was previously to Wakefield. We're aware that there are areas of Wakefield that don't have the service we would like to see already, let alone a further degraded one. And I was then in the difficult position that obviously at the previous one I was told they had to reduce some services in Wakefield over the summer, and that I could ensure members that they would come back for September. And then the difficulty I'm in now is I can't assure members that those services will come back when they would, and that is not a position I would like to be in, and it's not a position that we're able to make the decision on. It's a position that Arriva find themselves in, which is a real struggle. So I think what we really need to see from them is a clear plan of how they are going to get back to being able to cope with that network that they already run, let alone, unfortunately, start improving and adding more services. But we will keep yourself as a portfolio holder obviously up to date as other members as we go through. I'll go through further on the next ones. Did you want to come in on that point, Eric? Yeah.
Yes, I just want to reinforce what my colleague Matthew has said from Wakefield. The people of North Kirklees are just sick and tired of it. Just waiting at the bus stop, and it just misses. There's lots of all the time cancellations. I was in Leeds bus station on this Saturday afternoon, and the cancellations everywhere, because if you're going to Leeds bus stations, there's so many services from Arriva finishing there from all the districts, and it's just blue lights everywhere, no pun intended, but cancellations, they come up in blue. But let's hope they can get their act together. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed in your pack today, there was an application to be a bus driver from Arriva, just in case anybody's interested.
Thank you. Obviously, we don't know how long we'll be in this job, do we? It's not up to us to choose, so maybe some people may. I've got Councillor Jones first, and then Councillor Buckley after that.
I found that quite interesting when we talked about surveys and passenger numbers, and the fact that we still haven't got a full crew of bus drivers. I would point out that for the last 10 years, and I have an email that proves this, by the way, for the last 10 years, that's been the excuse from the operators. I don't find that acceptable. What I am seeing is, because of the number of cancellations, what the real result will be is that more people will drive and we'll get more congestion. So what I'm asking really is, have we ever done a survey asking people who are leaving why they're leaving the bus service? Is it pay? Is it stress? I don't know. I think that would be an interesting question, to be absolutely honest. I had a complaint this week from a resident whose first 3 buses were cancelled, had to get a taxi to work, and then will be disciplined next week for failing to turn up on time. This is the real effect of not being able to run the service correctly. And I'll be absolutely honest, I sit here today as a member, but I believe the service is totally not fit for purpose.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know whether any of us can give a report to that. We will obviously have the operators here at a future meeting. You'll be able to ask directly. It's the real struggle, and I think it shows why we're making those decisions that we are to put the network back in public control, really, because that all of us as elected members will receive those reports back from our residents around bus services that unfortunately aren't serving them as well as we would like them to be. There is a struggle no matter what. And because we've got that reduced number of people on the buses, that obviously leads to reduced income, and that does lead a struggle, where unfortunately what we're probably seeing is that the market is not functioning for public transport at the moment, and I think that's something we do need to work on, how we turn that around. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the Arriva situation, the bus station, is it still the intention that will be taken over as part of franchising? The reason I ask this is, at the moment, as we understand it, it's got a value of nothing because it's a condemned building. So is it proposed that the bus station is taken over at some nominal figure or nothing? So are we taking on a liability, or is it subject to, for instance, another use, in which case it will be worth a considerable amount of money? That's my first question. And then the other point I wanted to make is just a general point about buses and, for that matter, rail. The patronage figures are down to 75–77% of pre-COVID levels. And we keep, I think last year, the year before, we were talking about 80 something and slightly higher and going up. And it seems to have settled now and dropped a bit further to in the 70s. And it really is a poor state of affairs, isn't it, for reasons which we all know about. But I would just make the comment that if we take franchising on and this level continues to drop, we'll be holding a very expensive baby.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll bring Simon in a second. Just one clarification. The issues that I've seen in Wakefield and around the land, that is the Arriva depot rather than the bus station. There's two separate sites there. But just to clarify, that's the depot and the station is a separate one. But Simon will come more into that. You're completely right. And one of the concerns I have is that these numbers have flatlined. Is this the maximum amount of passengers that we will see on bus? Some of that may be from people not coming into the office every day of the week or similar. So you're right that there is a difference here in what we have to take up, and what the system is providing for than it did previously, and that's something that we'll all have to be aware of as we move into franchising. How do we deal with this differently than it was before, but how do we also keep it going? So that's a real struggle. Simon, do you want to come in on that first point?
Yeah, thank you. So with regard to negotiations around depots, I think not wishing to disclose our negotiating hand in public, and clearly we would bring appropriate private advice back to members at the right time. But Councillor Buckley, you've identified a number of the key factors that now need to play their way through in a negotiation. With regard to the issue of demand and bus franchising, I think there's probably two things that I'd stress. One is to remind members that within the case for change that we set out, and therefore within the financial case that was set out in it, we did set out a conservative, pessimistic view, conservative with a small c, pessimistic view in terms of a declining market, and demonstrate how we would be able to continue to manage the finances around it. And of course, from a broader public policy case, yes, there is a risk that continued decline in demand for bus travel makes the provision of bus travel more expensive. It makes it more expensive in particular for those who have no choice, who are dependent on bus travel, which we would argue is another good reason for us putting in place franchising to protect a network for those people without a choice, and then to re-promote it, because it's clearly not promoting itself well enough at the moment to those who have a choice.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess one aside I'd add to that is, even in the assessment, it showed that if we didn't go ahead with franchising and it continued with private operations, the cost would still go up to the CA as decline happened. So I guess what we've decided to do is to take hold of that and try and halt decline rather than see the inevitable happen, which would be going back really. I've got a bit of a list of people, so Councillor Pinnock next.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, page 24. This is about the under-19 travel scheme, but it's not about item in the private section. I just want to seek clarification, really. It says an announcement on this is expected in the budget, following which a decision will be made about how fare structures need to evolve. But then it says, in lieu of this announcement, modelled options, etc., etc. But if the budget sorts this out, what do we do then?
Thank you. Yeah, I think the decisions will come around various different fare implications that unfortunately there's a number of separate decisions, and we have to look at fares in a round. So there will be a decision on things like the single fare. There will also be a decision in how much money we get for the bus service improvement plan that we've asked for money in, which will show how much effectively we are able to put into fares. So there's a whole range of things. What you're seeing here is one decision we may have to take that we wanted to make sure was in front of members in case it has to be taken at the CA rather than here, because members would normally take it. I don't know if there's anything else anyone wants to add to that.
I mean, I think you've summed it up very well, Chair. There's an unknown factor, and it so happens that the autumn statement will take place the day before the meeting of the combined authority. So we have identified that there may be key decisions pending that relate to the budget, to the combined authority's budget mid-year, depending on the outcome of the Chancellor's statement.
Thank you. I'll come. I've got a bit of a list of people, Eric, there. So Councillor Williamson next.
Thanks, Chair. Just going obviously back to the Arriva issues in Wakefield. I think you mentioned the operators are due to come to this committee. Is there any chance we can get them in like as soon as possible, potentially at his next meeting? Because I think Arriva do need to come, and I do think they need to give an accounting for what's going on, obviously with the bus services. But I think the wider points, I think it's really scandalous they've just started putting up prices on tickets. I mean, the sort of longer term tickets like the weeklies and beyond and stuff have been a sticking point for residents in Wakefield for a while, because they're spending money on these weekly, monthly tickets and then having to then go and get taxis to and from work because buses aren't turning up and stuff. And I think that there's some serious question marks about the bus driver shortages. I know all operators have faced these, but obviously the work the combined authority's done in training drivers up seems to have eased some of the shortages with the other operators, but clearly it's not working for Arriva. So there's bigger questions around pay, conditions. Is it toxic management that's driving people up? Because they clearly can't keep their drivers. So is it about time we start demanding that they increase the pay, they start looking at the conditions, they start looking at how they treat the staff and stuff? Because we can't go on like this. We're gonna, as we're moving towards franchising, I can quite clearly see a position where Wakefield's got like very little bus services going if we carry on down this road, and it does need addressing. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess, as you say, most of the questions you've asked there are for the operator to respond rather than ourselves. The chair has asked Arriva to come back to her with some details of how they see their recovery back to the services we'd expect to see to Wakefield. At that point, she's very clear that she'd like them to come to the committee and explain that to members. And I think we would very much like them to be there to answer those questions. At the moment, I don't think it was the time to, because what we'd like to do is see their recovery plan first, so that we've got something that members can look at, scrutinise and add to. But yeah, we really need to know what the reasons are for that operator specifically, and why they may be more impacted than others. Completely right. Councillor Wheatley. Has your question been asked? Fine. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just on a point of clarification around the calculation of the patronage figures, do they in some way take into account the shrinkage of the bus network that has happened since pre-pandemic? Because obviously, to borrow my colleague Eric's phrase, the spider's web of bus networks is, particularly in Wakefield, a shadow of its former self. And so can some of the failure to recover the patronage levels be attributed to the fact that there just aren't buses for those people to be on anymore? And on a second point of optimism, according to Andy Burnham, since franchising, the Greater Manchester's bus patronage is at 105% of pre-pandemic levels. So there is light coming from the end of the tunnel, even if it is coming from the west side of the Pennines.
Yeah, I mean, those figures don't take into account, as far as I understand it, the decline of the network. So it's that many fewer people are on a bus. It doesn't take into account the people that may no longer have a bus that they can get in. And we know, unfortunately, a lot of the changes were frequency reductions. And when you reduce the frequency of a bus, then people do start to think of other options for travel. Because if your bus is every 15 minutes, people will just turn up to the stop. If your bus is fewer than every half an hour, then you're going to have to look at your timetable, work out if that journey matches you, and by that time you've already put a barrier in the way, haven't you? So that's real struggles. We do have higher patronage, I think, than Greater Manchester in the figures, so that's one thing to add to there. They were starting at a position where I think they had less of their historic network than we do, and a lower patronage. We will bring back, members have previously asked around more detail around those figures that we supply, the overall percentage patronage figures. We're working through some of those with the operators at the moment to supply members better figures for, hopefully you'll see at the next meeting, a bit more of a breakdown, because I think members wanted to understand, yes, 75% of patronage is fine to see, but where is that patronage not happening? We're also working on better things in terms of the punctuality of services, so that you can see what does 82% punctuality look like and how does that match around the network. So hopefully we'll have a bit more information to supply on that for you when we come through in the next one. I don't know if anyone else wanted to add to any of that. obviously we don't find ourselves necessarily in competition with Greater Manchester at all times, but we'll be there in franchise, and we'd hope that boost they've seen through a single brand and a clear fare structure through the franchising would be a boost we'll see at the point that we start to go down that road. Councillor Courtney next.
Yeah, thank you. And in fact, rather than being in competition with them, it'd be great to be working with them so that we also get some cross-border servicing and cross-border ticketing, and actually we can have a transport system throughout the bus transport system throughout the whole of the north that works in conjunction with each other. But that's not what I was going to say. I suppose what I just on the whole sort of point about buses and journeys and will there be a service, and or will we be left holding an expensive baby? And I think that if we're wanting to give people the choice about how they travel and to encourage active travel, which is one of our aims, I think across probably all the authorities and certainly across the combined authority, I think we need to see government support, whether it's governmental at national or regional level. I think we need to see government support of public transport, particularly in buses, as an investment rather than a drain, and it's an investment for and it's an investment in the people of West Yorkshire, and I think it's really important that we see that as an investment. It's not a subsidy, it's not like a pain, it's an investment in our people and our places, and I just think it's a really positive thing because of the benefits that it can bring. Just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why. I mean, a large amount of the network that we see in West Yorkshire is funded by the combined authority through the transport levy that comes from councils, because there are services on a Sunday that wouldn't exist were we not funding them. There'll be early morning, late evening services that wouldn't exist were we not funding them in order for people to maintain those jobs. And there are some entire services where there are communities that would not have a service at all were we not funding one there, and that's the decision we make. And I guess that point around that network is that where we're choosing where to spend that money, we have a set of criteria that we've talked through with members that are around the deprivation in the area, the link to employment that it needs to have in the area, whether they have access to any other buses, and that's the decision we're making when we look over that. Some form of that criteria will have to go in then beyond franchising to why we choose to provide bus services in a different place, and that's not always how the operators at the moment are making that decision, because that's not necessarily what their job is. But as local authorities, our job is to support our residents, and there are times when a bus service would be the thing we would want to provide for people. So certainly that hopefully should add that value. I can't see any more questions on this, but we've got the rail section of the report to come into, which Helen, I know you're ready to come in on. So we'll start that process.
Thank you, Councillor Kyle. So part 2 of the performance report on rail. So I think first of all, just to say that across the piece, there's been an increase in rail patronage across Northern TPA and LNER over the last kind of quarter. That's mainly been due to, we think, around the reduced number of cancellations. So that's been positive, particularly across TPE. Since last Transport Committee at the end of August, we reported on the December kind of timetable changes. Since then, there's just been a couple of updates that I'll just quickly run through. First one was around changes to call-in patterns between Cosgates and Garforth on TPE. There's a slight change in number of evening and morning calls and around that frequency from December. Secondly, Northern's capacity on the Penistone line has been reinstated due to stock kind of upgrades, and that's will come back into play from December. Thirdly, we are kind of continuing to work and understand with Northern kind of why the Sunday service through Pontefract Baghill is going to be taken out, and those conversations, we're trying to get some conversations in place to try and progress and understand that. And then lastly, so cross-country services that were temporarily stopped through Wakefield Westgate over the summer for works have been reinstated as well. So that's a positive there. In terms of performance, so overall performance continues to be challenging due to strikes, non-West Day working agreements in places, and sickness, albeit, as I just said, patronage has gone up due to reduced number of cancellations overall. There have been, though, an increased number of cancellations, partially by Northern, and they have been issued with a formal breach of notice for cancellation levels by Rail North Partnership. And Northern are coming or intend to come back to the Rail North Partnership with a remedial plan on this basis. Also affecting performance, obviously, of course, we're now in autumn and there is a leaf fall issue. And so a management plan of that is being put in place, and there are special timetables, particularly around the Penistone line, but other areas. There are a number of kind of remedial routes and things that the operators put in place to manage that leaf fall. Elsewhere, Transpennine route upgrade continues to progress, and there are major work improvements at Huddersfield Station, with currently under construction of the 2 new platforms and the customer waiting, as well as improvements to the access, a new roof and track upgrades around to allow more capacity for trains. So that work is currently underway. Also working at Murfield Station and Ravensthorpe Station, and they are doing track kind of renewals between Crossgates and Garforth. So quite a programme of works is currently underway. And finally, just on kind of ticketing, etc. around Northern are currently working with a number of organisations to do a number of ticketing partnerships, which are currently being delivered across the piece.
Thank you. Eric, did you want to come in on the rail issue?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that comprehensive report, Alan. It was really good. But I'd just like to report to the committee that some members took the opportunity to visit Huddersfield Station, and I think they were mightily impressed with the work that's actually going on there. It's just a shame that not a lot more of the committee, took up the invitation. As I think it was worth going, and members will comment on that too. But work continues at a pace, as Helen said. There is another blockade about to start from Morley on the 21st to I think the 5th of November, which will affect Dewsbury in particular, Dewsbury Batley, and other stations on the line to Huddersfield, but diversions will be made. But I can only say that they're doing a fantastic job at TIU. I don't work for them, by the way, but they are doing a really good job. I can only applaud them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions on the rail section? Councillor Rosshaw and then Councillor Moore.
Thank you. The dreaded phrase of more of a comment than a question, perhaps, Chair. But no, just reiterating the importance of restoring and getting a response from the Secretary of State on restoring the Bradford-Ilkley line in particular. Obviously, we had the Lancet, which when it was closed, which really affected our connectivity, which obviously wasn't the best timing with the interchange being closed as well. But it's just, it throws up one of those things where you can understand business cases and how they're put together and how, with limited resources, organisations might look at transport data and try and come up with a kind of on-the-paper system that makes most use of it. But the challenge we've got, obviously, is in terms of things like how communities connect to each other, the geography of the district, and how those people get to one place or another. What you start to get, if you're not careful, when you have this kind of salami slicing of services, and it's obviously the same with buses as well, is it kind of affects that district cohesion as well. People in Ilkley can't get through to Bradford and vice versa. That affects things. We had staff on the council that were suddenly working from home a lot more because they lived in Ilkley. And that means people are kind of growing apart rather than moving together forward as a district. So it kind of has a wider social impact rather than just passenger numbers as well. So really, I know obviously it mentions that the chair's obviously continuing to enforce that message. But yeah, we still need that response, so it's on the table and a big priority for the Combined Authority as well as us.
Thank you. Yeah, and we'll change that response as well to make sure we do get it, because it is an issue the chair is very keen to get resolved. Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Chair. Just regarding the York to Sheffield route, obviously Pontefract Baghill is affected by that, and we do need to know the rationale behind it. So obviously it's disappointing that they're still not met with you. We did raise it last meeting, so any feedback on that will be greatly appreciated. And just for any doubt, I've mentioned Pontefract twice. I don't represent Pontefract or live there. It's just I'm here for the Wakefield district, that's all.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin and then...
Thank you, Chair. Yes. at the risk of repeating myself from a previous Transport Committee meeting, I think that the operator of last resort is to be commended on the turnaround that it's managed to oversee in TPE, because it generally was abysmal the year before last, and I hope and pray that they are able to carry on that improved service into the larger timetable come December. But can I just officially advise them again to please reconsider the withdrawal of direct lead services in morning peak times from Slowett and Marsden stations in South Kirklees. It's the first time since 1982 that there hasn't been one. So I will not drop this issue, and I will keep bringing it up again and again. So if they're listening, they take note.
Thank you, and that is an issue you have continued to raise. Councillor Firth, did you want to come in on those last couple of points?
Yes, my last point on this. Councillor Worley, I can reassure you that conversations are definitely taking place about Megan, and maybe in the not too distant future, you might have some good news.
Thank you. I can't see any other questions on this, so I have got Councillor Steele. Do you want to come in as the last one? Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. I'd like to reiterate what Alex was saying about the Brantford-Ilkley line, and kind of link it to the use of senior people's metro passes, because they're not allowed to use them after 4 o'clock. So if you're limiting the travel on the frequency of the services, then they really do get stuck. If they're coming back from Leeds to Ilkley, for example, I think the last train that they can get is 3:32, and the next one is 4 minutes past 4, and they're not allowed to use that, which means people who've gone for hospital appointments are stuck and either having to pay to travel on the train rather than use their passes. Can that be looked into?
Thank you. Is that something we're able to provide detail on now, or can we take that issue away and look at it? We'll take that issue away, Councillor Steele, and come back to you and or the committee on that point. Okay, I can't see any other questions on that, so we'll move on to the last report, which is the project approvals. And Simon, are you taking us through these?
Thank you, Chair. So we have one scheme for project approval today, Chair, which is the A660 Lawnswood Roundabout scheme. The intention of the scheme, which is at a recognised collision hotspot, is to improve safety by introducing signals for traffic and pedestrian crossings on all of the arms of the roundabout, alongside then onward improvements for walking, cycling, and also those using wheelchairs or other such mobility aids. The scheme has gone through the appraisal process as set out in our assurance framework, and we can see that the scheme has a number of key benefits to a range of different users. If we take a traditional Department for Transport approach to benefit cost ratio, that produces a negative benefit cost ratio. We see this consistently with active travel schemes because of the approach that's taken within that BCR approach to assign value to the movements of cars in comparison to other vehicles. If we take an approach that we have developed, which considers the benefits that aren't associated with those direct delays, then we find that there is a significant BCR. Setting aside the BCR, our advice is that the scheme continues to fit well with the combined authorities' policy intent as set out within the local transport plan for the promotion of active travel. And therefore we are recommending the agreement of the onward development of the scheme and release of the first £1.252 million of funding to support early works whilst we continue to work with the City Council to complete their full submission. That would take the total approval on the scheme up to just in excess of £3 million.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, and that's an issue we've talked about at the committee before, haven't we, of the evaluation of schemes, not taking account the benefits for active modes of transport and road safety as much as they do necessarily for improving journey times for private vehicles. So that's one of the concerns we've had previously. So that's obviously something we see through this scheme. I'll open to any questions on that. Councillor Ross or Councillor Buckley?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, it's not the first time we've had a transport scheme that kind of runs afoul of Treasury BCR things as we kind of try and kind of develop how we look at things more and think more holistically in them. I think it was Councillor Courtney in the Premier actually mentioned Vision Zero, and actually looking through this in the fuller business case, that's not actually mentioned as a thing, but it probably go counter to that Vision Zero strategy concept to not approve this when it's more focused on road safety. And it may be a question for us to take to the Vision Zero board as well, which I'm deputy chair of how do we consider these reports in that kind of Vision Zero world where, okay, Vision Zero is more about that kind of almost like a pre-stage, so you don't have to wait till the KSIs go up, but this is a road safety priority scheme rather than a traditional highway scheme. So how do we play that into that kind of Vision Zero world, really? So kind of sympathetic to the challenges of how you report this, and maybe that's an opportunity then to look at that, because it's very, very clearly set out that the KSIs are something that it's going to be measured against, which is good to see. So yeah, might be something for us to take to that board as well and think about how we produce those reports.
Thank you, yeah, that's useful. And being involved in this scheme at Leeds as well, I know that unfortunately in this case there has been a lot of serious injuries and casualties at this roundabout, and it's taken a struggle to get to the stage where we can bring something forward to try and stop or reduce those, certainly. So that's certainly a really good suggestion, because yeah, if it did not have that poor record that it already has, I think it'd be a struggle to bring forward junctions that may be similar but haven't had that record yet, where in Vision Zero we'd like to change them. That would be almost impossible, I think, to bring forward. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. Well, unlike some of the people in this room, I use this roundabout probably every day, or nearly every day. And how we've managed to spend, or proposing to spend, £13 million on a few traffic lights on a roundabout, I do not know. And the benefit cost ratio of minus 2.15 to 1, which is categorised, it says here, as offering very poor value for money. And then it goes on to say, these highways disbenefits are delays to traffic resulting from signalisation of the roundabout. Yes, well, we know they are. And the fact is that however much people would hope that lots of different people travelled in different ways, 95% of the journeys in Leeds and round that roundabout are by private car. And there's a limit to how much you can limit the use of private cars, in my view. And on a final point, it mentions here the scheme's climate implications include a net increase of carbon emissions over the 60-year appraisal period. Well, I don't know who's going to carry that out. Perhaps there'll be about 15 when they start. But the whole thing, to my mind, is a complete waste of money. And it doesn't, we're not against, we're in favour of saving lives and having fewer collisions. But £13 million is just too much.
Thank you. I mean, we've been through this a couple of times anyway, haven't we, Neil? Because both of us were there when it was called in for scrutiny at Leeds as a decision, and I know we had different views on it then, shall we say. I think in this case it's not to limit the use of private vehicles, it's just to make sure that they stop to allow people to cross the road, really, is my view. But you've heard my view before anyway. Well, come on, Councillor Morley, I think you wanted to come in, and then Councillor Pryor.
An area I do know well. I have family that live in the local area. But it always surprised me, why do people think that car users are king when it comes to the road? The roads and our highways are there for everybody to use. For mothers and with push chairs, for cycle users, they're there for everybody and should be safe for everybody. We had a similar scheme just on the outskirts of Wakefield, the Newton Bar scheme, and the same argument, people there, slow the cars down. The amount of people that see that's a safe area to cross now, like I say, families, push chairs, and we made it safe. So I don't understand why people get fixated on the supremacy of the car when they should be there for all to use.
Thank you. We'll take that as a comment. I did forget to maybe fact check one of your points you made, Councillor Buckley. I did see the report, I can't remember the exact number, but it's 60-something% of journeys in Leeds that are made by the car, not 95, I must say. So there's a point there that there will be different amounts in different areas, and I'm sure on that Headingley corridor there's a lot larger bus use than there is in many areas. But Councillor Pryor, did you want to come in?
Yeah, and just further to that point, as someone who does use that roundabout as a pedestrian, as a bus driver, as a cyclist, I get off my bike when I reach the Lawnswood roundabout to walk around it because I value my life. It is simply not fit for purpose at the moment, and I think I just really want to put on record kind of disagreement with the DFT's calculation on value for money. It's adding 30 seconds onto car journeys but tackling a huge accident black spot, which is right next to a school. It's worth noting as well, where there's a huge number of school children who do use that as a walking route because obviously they can't drive, they're children. So I think the DFT not acknowledging though, or valuing to the same degree the safety of pedestrians, children, cyclists, it just shows that's not fit for purpose. And I know this scheme's been a long time coming, so I'll be very pleased to see it getting underway. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ray wanted to come in on that, and then
yeah, just a bit further on what Councillor Pryor's saying. There are 2 high schools reasonably close to that, and I can imagine that quite a lot of parents drive their children to school, because I wouldn't be confident with my teenagers, wonderful things that they are, going to school across that road. And so, I could see that there could be significant reduction in parents taking children to school just because they think they're going to be safe doing so.
Thank you. Councillor McGrath?
My concern is the majority of people discussing the issues that they're having, such as crossing the road, cycling, being the issues. I mean, I'm looking at the crash map stats, and I don't know how viable they are, but they're saying that in the last 20 years there's been 15 serious incidents, 0 fatal. Now I don't know how. I mean, I can only go by the data I've got. I'd like to know a little bit more about the data of how much we're saving by spending £13 million. It's a lot of money. But in terms of cycling, I mean, I know the roundabout well. My partner went to Lawnswood School, which is on the Headingley side, so thankfully she crosses much further down and goes up the other side of the road. But if the issue is cyclists and school children, then traffic lights for the traffic aren't the best solution. The best solution would be, a tunnel or a bridge, because then you're going over the road, you're not slowing down any traffic. So is it that the road traffic incidents are the biggest one, or is it pedestrian, school children, or cyclists? Because if it's the cyclists, I would much prefer not to have to get off my bike and go down a tunnel and up the other side, than I would to have to stop 3 times as I cross each road and stop the traffic for each one. Wouldn't it be better to have something for pedestrians if that's the issue that seems to be coming up the most? But I don't know the statistics other than what I'm looking at crashmap.co.uk, which is the only available data I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. we have gone into them. Those figures sound a bit low to me based on, I think that I remember seeing the 5-year figures, and it was more than 30 incidents involving a large number of cyclists going across the junction, hence including cycling provision, and then there were collisions of pedestrians, and there were a number of minor collisions of motor vehicles that weren't
severe, sorry.
But yeah, but that's what you've got on that data, and it's right to go in. We have been through it in scrutiny in Leeds, and in Leeds we've been quite satisfied really that this is a key accident black spot in Leeds. It's one of our sites of concern, and therefore something we'd want to solve. But yeah, absolutely right to look into those figures now we've looked at. I think one of the asides is really that suggestion of how we tackle it, because in this one thing I've noted is that roundabout is not like every other roundabout we have in Leeds, which the majority of which have a crossing, and this doesn't. How we've got this far really without there being a crossing at that roundabout, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest with you, because every other roundabout that we have already expects drivers to wait at the red light for people to cross the road and for cyclists to cross the road, etc., and go through. So I think that's where the difficulty is. Probably we're putting in at this roundabout what should have been there for possibly the last 40 years, especially. But yeah, we'll come through. Did I see yourself, Councillor Williamson? No. Councillor Firth, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Did
You must have been psychic there, Eric, to know that that's what he was intended to do. I see that recommendation moved by Councillor Pryor, seconded by Councillor Firth. Can we take a vote on that project approval? Thank you. Any against? Thank you. Anything you wanted to summarise at the end of that, Simon, or that's the end of that report. So, and that's the end of all the reports. So the next Transport Committee will not be until January. There's obviously a lot of issues we've raised here. We will see them at the CA, and then we'll keep in touch, obviously, with members about some of those issues in between the meetings. But thank you all for attending. It's good to see so many people here today, and we'll see you all after Christmas.